right, bringing it home. Come on, people. I need a little enthusiasm. I understand it was very difficult to get you away from the desserts, more food, that was out there, but it was probably the activity because we're all family now, right? We have spent the last little more than a day being vulnerable with each other, telling secrets to one another, aspirations, joys, family, furry family, all of that kind of stuff. So I can appreciate that it might be difficult to corral you all back into this room. So for that, I want to thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about the work that I've done, certainly in my own whole career, but the research in particular I've done that informed my book, Essential. And so leadership is hard. Leadership's really hard. How many of you are feeling it? Yeah. It's like nothing we've experienced. Why is it hard? Well, we've got new technology coming into the workforce. We've heard a lot about, you can't go anywhere without somebody saying AI, right? Soon I'm going to be with my pets and they're gonna say, well, have you used AI walking your dogs? No, I have not. There are evolving expectations of employees, of their leaders and of their organizations. Employee disengagement is at an all-time high in numbers we have never seen before. We're looking at a skills shortage. I mean, just this year, we're in a 4 million skilled worker deficit in this country. Now, it's going to be 6 million by 2030. I think that's being accelerated in this moment. We are looking at, and people have talked about, socioeconomic issues and political issues that are impacting us every day. But these are impacting us as leaders. We can't divorce ourselves from all of these things in our workplace and when we're dealing with the humanity within our workplaces. Trust is at an all-time low. The Edelman survey said last year that people distrust organizations at 62%, right? We are at an incredible crisis period where people don't trust their leaders, don't trust organizations. The political arena, the lack of trust is even lower, and media is even lower. So people are dying to find where can they find some trust in the work that they do, in the people that they work with? Where can they find grace and hope? Who can they rely on to mentor, to develop them, live in an apprentice culture when trust is at this all-time low? Now, all of this is costing us $8.8 trillion a year globally in lost productivity due to low employee engagement. Think about that. That's Amazon, Microsoft, and Apple combined in annual revenues. We can't afford not to address this issue. In the research for the book, we talked to over 1,000 CEOs globally. 100% of them said they know they need to change their approach to leading their organization and what happens in those organizations. Whoops, only 25%, let's go back. Only 25% are even thinking about doing something different. Think about that gap. You are just as inundated with everything coming at them that they're almost paralyzed to move in any direction. They're reacting. When was the last time your organizations did all of that scenario planning that we loved doing so long ago, and black swan scenarios and all of that? We're not doing that because we're just trying to keep pace with the changes that are happening today. So leaders are overwhelmed, and thus their employees are overwhelmed. And we can't afford to do nothing. You know, Dean talked a little bit about that the new pandemic is mental health. And that's costing us, he says 300 million. I have data that says $322 billion a year. That's companies and brands like Bank of America, L'Oreal, I mean, pick your company. That would crater one of those companies if they were losing that kind of revenue. So where do we begin? Well, we've talked a lot. When we started this session this morning, you know, we were talking, Eugene was talking about, well, what is culturati, right? It is part of its mission, and I'll paraphrase, is helping people at work. And we've talked about the technologies and the strategies of helping people at work. I would submit we can't help people at work if we don't understand their humanity first and embrace their humanity first and foremost. And that takes a different kind of leadership. We're applying 20th century playbooks to leadership in a 21st century world. And we're not willing to change the narrative. So the consultants in the room will know this very well. When we are talking to companies about anything, and when you're developing your own strategies, you begin with purpose. Purpose should inform everything that you do. It should inform strategy. It should inform the culture, which informs the structure, which informs the op model, which informs the skills and the talent that you bring within the organization. And guess what? The enabler to all of that is technology. It's not the lead in the story. It's the humans who have to sweat this out and design what does purpose mean. It is not an intellectual process, people. This is visceral. And we've got to acknowledge that through our human connections. I'm not passionate about this at all. When you think about the shifts that need to be made in this 20th century world, because of what all of those factors that I talked about earlier and employee expectations are, these are huge shifts. We're not talking about just profit. We're talking about purpose, profit via purpose. You've heard a lot about that today. You've talked about this ability for autonomy to be created within your organizations. We have thought about what are we doing, and again, Dean talked about this beautifully with Patagonia. What are we doing to our world? What's the connection we have with our customers? Customers have more say in what we do as organizations than ever before, and they are mouthpieces to getting it out there. And they can expose so many ills, fairly, unfairly. But we're living in a different world that we have to shift our focus around. We talk about, in Essential, emotionally mature leaders. We have talked about emotional intelligence as the silver bullet to leaders. If they could only become more emotionally intelligent. Well, that's great. Emotional intelligence, you take an assessment, you learn what your attributes are in terms of empathy and communication and transparency and all that stuff. Every leader that I know who took that, most leaders I know that took that, said, oh, this is great, in a drawer. Emotional intelligence is incredibly important, but it's not enough. We need emotionally mature leaders. Why? One of the biggest reasons is the narrative with organizations has changed. I've been in the workforce, as I said yesterday, nearly 40 years. Damn, I don't look like it, right? Tell me I don't look like, no, I'm not kidding. That was cheesy, right? That was just, lame. Yeah, thank you, I appreciate you. we have been asking a one-directional question for decades in our organizations as leaders. What do we require of our employees? It's not, I mean, we should still be asking that question. What kind of skills do we need? What competencies? What's our culture like? How do we, engage, making sure that we have the right people in the right places to execute on strategy? It's still a good question for us to be asking as leaders. But now, employees are asking, well, wait a second. What do I require of you as leaders and the organization? And what we found in our research is that they require 4 things. There's more, but these are primarily the 4 things. Number 1 is purpose. Your insides better match your outsides. And your customers are demanding this of you as well. If you've got those pretty statements on the wall and on your website and you're talking about values and you're talking about purpose, but you're not living to those, you will not have the best talent in your organization. Agency. Agency and autonomy to have a say in when, where, and how I work. It's not that I don't want to work really hard. That's not what people are saying. But if we as leaders can architect work with our employees in the best way that meets how they work best and when and where they work best, we've got a really good chance of keeping those employees. The return to office policies that we've seen, one of the world's largest retailers out there has lost, because of a mandate back to return to work, 85% of their 1 and 2 performers. 85%. Amazon is heading that way. I live in Seattle. I see it day in and day out. They're saying, come back to work, but do your work the same way you've always done it, right? There's not a connection to purpose in the work that I do, right, that contributes to our customers or to my colleagues. That's the string we're not pulling. And emotionally mature leaders pull that string. Well-being. This isn't airy-fairy, let's all go, do yoga every day. Not suggesting that that is airy-fairy. But it is, I do demand civility in the way that I work and not working 80-hour weeks. Or if I do, can it be predictable and flexible enough that the hours I don't work, I can be on the soccer field with my kid? Or I could just go get a haircut. Or, I can do a doctor's appointment, right? But we don't have those dialogues. We still, in a 20th century mindset, still expect that if you're swiping in and sitting in your chair, well, then you must be productive and working. And the last area is connection. How do we create connection? I will say that the firms that I've been a part of, the consulting firms that I've been a part of, and McKinsey, I know you do this well, is that we hotel. We're not always in the same office, we're not always, but as we are traveling, we figure out who, through AI and through an app, who's in the zip code I'm in. Who's in Austin? I can find that. Let's have dinner. Or let's go for a run, right? There are ways for us to connect that don't always have to be in the office. In fact, our research shows that the most lonely employees in the workforce today are the ones back in the office. We've always talked about soft skills as if they're second class, right? Or human skills as if they're second class. Human skills are the new power skills. Satya Nadella said this repeatedly 3 years ago when he talks about empathy a lot for his own personal story. But he has said at several conferences, Soft skills are the new power skills. Soft skills are the new skills that we need as leaders in our organizations. And those soft skills have to be intentional. How I interact with you, how I understand what you're going through in order to help you, understanding what the customer needs. If we did the same thing, employee engagement surveys are okay, but they don't really tell you the whole story. They never will. Because trust in organizations is so low, anything an organization puts out in employee engagement is suspect. Like, who's this going to go back to? How is this going to impact us? So we need a different way to engage. So what are emotionally mature leaders? Emotionally mature leaders have a fundamentally different mindset, and that mindset is suspension of self-interest. You're not that important. Have a sense of humor about yourself. We have to have a mindset as an emotionally mature leader that it's not all about me. It's about how I suspend my own self-interest in service of the people that I'm actually working with. Then I have the opportunity to live purpose. I said this in our session earlier. I can't tell you how many senior leaders I work with who are 5, 7 years out from retirement that all of a sudden say to me, oh, I want to start mentoring, I want to take care of our people. And it's like, where have you been the last 38 years? Right? We can't wait for that moment when we're suddenly in transition to think about the humans in our organization. So this mindset of suspension of self-interest for the good of the humans that we're working with, and frankly for our customers or the product that we're selling, that's critical. And that's a different shift for a 21st century leader. And I'm using leader as manager, anybody who's associating with people. The second piece of the behavioral piece of emotionally mature leaders is this insatiable curiosity about one another. Not just curiosity, insatiable curiosity about one another. What makes you tick? What do you love doing? What do you hate doing? I'm not going to promise you you're not going to do things that you hate. But let's talk about what are the headwinds and the tailwinds in your life, not just here in your work. Right? This notion of contextual competence, of understanding others. People are coming to work with one hand tied behind their backs because they're that sandwich generation where they're taking care of their parents or they're taking care of little kids, or they're going through a divorce, or they've just gotten a diagnosis, or they're having mental health issues themselves, or their car broke down and it's going to screw up the whole schedule of getting the kids to school. There is context in which we show up at work. We can no longer check our humanness at the door when we walk through our organizations. We come with that. How might it impact us on a daily basis? How might it impact our engagement in fulfilling the needs of the business? So this notion of being incredibly curious about one another is so important today. And guess what? We don't have time to do it. And if you guys are anything like I used to be, it was 6 a.m. Teams calls. I live on the West Coast, sometimes 5 a.m. Teams calls till 6 at night, back to back to back to back to back. When do I even have time? So being intentional about saying, listen, I'm taking 2 hours back in my day, and I'm just going to go learn something about my people. Leaders used to say to me, especially when I was in a chief diversity officer, well, I don't know how to talk to a black woman as a white male. I don't know how to talk. What am I supposed to say to her? Like, are you kidding? What, I mean, if you were standing on the sidelines of a basketball game with her, what would you probably say? You have in common basketball. Hey, how are you? What do you do? What are you excited about? What are you not so excited about? Like going back to, I said to somebody, I'm aging myself again, is to those social graces my mother used to, and father used to teach me when I was 5 years old. Hi, how are you? Start asking questions about people because they love to talk about themselves, right? This is the kind of behavior we need to value more than back-to-back Zoom or team calls. And that then creates this culture of excellence where we are those master architects because we're not thinking about what we get out of it or ourselves and our own bonus, and we are learning everything we can about the people around us. Guess what? We have the power to architect who and how people flourish at work. But you cannot do that through AI alone. You cannot do that with back-to-back meetings. We have to change the way we physically work in order to work smarter, better, and in a much more fulfilled way, and create those cultures of excellence and redefine what excellence is. Excellence isn't always productivity measures. It's not these arbitrary, measurements and measuring sticks that we've held out there for so long. If it was still that, we would not have $8.8 trillion lost in our economy a year, or $322 billion being spent on mental health. And that's a low number because most people don't talk about it. So there is real hope if we can move from being emotionally intelligent, know ourselves, to actually be mature in how we show up. There is real hope for this. So I submit my mission is to inject humanity back into the workplace. Because if we inject humanity back into the workplace, we solve for the workplaces in which, and the humans in which those workplaces reside. I would say that we know all the statistics of when we stay, when we are focused on humans, when we are focused on culture, when we are focused on our own behavior, companies outperform all others. But we've been building that business case for as long as I've been in business, 40 years. It isn't a business case, it's a human urgency. And we're out of time. And there's a lot of hope to put humanity back into business. And we're seeing it here. Everyone I talk to that I saw last year, isn't this great? Yeah, God, I can just breathe and talk to people. It's like hanging out with a bunch of old friends and making a whole bunch of new ones. This is what it is about. Going home and rejecting the models that we live in and having the courage to change them so that we can connect with one another and be curious about one another and tap into that humanity. Boy, please don't wait until you're my age that you're thinking backwards and saying, oh, I wish I had. Thank you.